Today we talk about blossoms of the Savannah. So we're going to review Kcse 2021. The misunderstanding in families can cause serious conflict in relationships, referring closely to the relationship between Kcse and his daughters in Blossoms of the Savannah. Write an essay in support of this statement. So I'm going to tell you exactly what the examiner needed. This can help us in preparation of future questions, similar questions. The style used in answering these questions is universal, really, for any of the books. So today we are going to use Blossoms of the Savannah. The book is right here, so I'll be referring to it from time to time. But the tips are useful for any candidate preparing to answer any paper 3 questions that are based on set text. So I'll begin with how to answer Kcse essay questions based on Blossoms of the Savannah. So I'll just basically give you the general tips first before we go into the specific breakdown of the particular question that we've just read. 1, read the question carefully so that you comprehend its demands. That is a very underrated step. Most students read the question, but not to the keenness that is deserved. Then once you read the question, also identify the keywords which will aid in your correct interpretation of the question. So keywords, we'll go back to the question and see which ones will help us to interpret the question correctly. So in this particular question, misunderstandings in families can cause serious conflicts in relationships. So as a candidate, you must identify the misunderstanding between Kcse and his daughters and link it to the resultant conflict. So here the most important things are the misunderstanding and the conflict. Those are the keywords. Then after that, come up with points of interpretation. And here we ask, what is your understanding? What is the misunderstanding, and what is the conflict? Those will guide us. Those 2 questions will guide us when coming up with points of interpretation. So come up with at least 4, but you can go up to 5 or 6. But remember, the essay shouldn't be too long, so 5 is not too bad. After you've done that, now we have the points. Go ahead, answer the question, and as you're writing your essay, keep going back to the question. Misunderstanding in families can cause serious conflicts in relationship. Referring closely to the relationship between Kcse and his daughters in Blossoms of the Savannah, write an essay in support of this statement. So as you write, keep going back. Well, you see, if you keep going back to the question in the course of your writing, it helps you to avoid what we call digressions. Digressions, irrelevance, and of course just narration, where you're just repeating, you're just rewriting the book. So once you keep glancing and seeing the keywords, at least now you just be answering the question based on the keywords and bringing out the values, the moral or the values captured in the various episodes that answer the question. The keywords in our question are misunderstanding and conflict. So here we are supposed to show how Kcse has different values and opinions from those of his daughters, because the question is asking specifically about Kcse and the daughters. So how are they different from how does Kcse think differently from how Taio and Rezian do? So that difference in opinions is what we're calling misunderstanding, that the father thinks this way and the daughters think totally opposite of the father. So that brings up misunderstanding. So the misunderstanding leads to, of course, altercations, squabbles, wrangles, arguments between them, and that is what we're calling the conflict. So for example, we're talking about FGM. Tell us what Kcse thinks about FGM, and tell us what, say, Rezian or Taio thinks about the same. So that's the misunderstanding. So since the father and the daughters do not have clear communication between them to sort out the misunderstanding, it gives birth to conflict. we can see that the question is quite easy to interpret, and it's also relatable. These things happen in our families. So literature is basically a mirror of society. Okay, so this argument, we accepted both confrontational wrangles or squabbles, and also just the conflict that arises in my thinking. Like, remember the point on the extravaganza. Taiyo and Olekaelo do not really clash, do not have a clear altercation or confrontation, but there's a conflict because Taiyo feels like she feels wronged by the father, and their bond that was strong is weakened by the fact that the father refuses her the permission to attend the extravaganza, you know. So that is also a conflict. So it can be confrontational, or simply how the daughter disagrees with the father and how they feel after the disagreement. So in each point, you must link the difference in opinion, that is the misunderstanding, to the falling out. So we should actually see that Olekaelo and the daughters fall out at some point or have a conflict, and this conflict results from the difference in opinion, which we are calling misunderstanding. Some students lost marks in these questions. In this question, why? So we need to explore reasons that can make you lose marks in such a question. One, some students failed to interpret the question correctly. Okay, so they ended up highlighting only one part. The question has two key areas: misunderstanding and conflict. So if you just discuss the misunderstanding or the conflict, then you lose some marks. So the examiner expected you as a candidate to give to give details of the conflict that arises as a result of the misunderstanding between Olekaelo and the daughters. So you had to give details for both the keywords that had to come out. For example, what is Taiyo's opinion about FGM? Give us some evidence from the text. What does her father want instead? What does Taiyo's father want instead? So that's the misunderstanding. And then how does this result in conflict? How does Taiyo feel after undergoing FGM? That is the conflict. So we wanted to see that had to come out for you to score the full marks. So we see that Taiyo is opposed to FGM because she says on page 33, I also don't care whether I'm counted among Intoi and Mengalana. My body belongs to myself. Only when I am dead would anyone mutilate my body. She is opposed to FGM. Her father plans for her forcible circumcision, of course, we know that. And that makes her utterly displeased with him. On page 276, the author tells us that they both find fault with their father for wanting to please Oloisudori at the detriment of his children's lives. So these textual details show how misunderstanding in families can cause conflicts. Now, in order to come up with points, of course, we just have to use the episodic approach. And we must master and internalize the episodes. That's the only way. And that is by reading the book repeatedly. Students who gave sufficient textual details, after correct interpretation of the question, scored full marks. So it is possible. It is possible that you can get 20 out of 20 in these questions. So what is the task? What did the examiner want you as a candidate to do? One, identify episodes where the father and the daughter's expectations are not in line. That is the misunderstanding bit. Then, of course, there you ask yourself, what does the father want? And then also tell us, what do the daughters want instead? That is the misunderstanding. After you've given us the misunderstanding, then you should also bring out the conflict that ensues from the misunderstanding. Give specific textual details on how Reziane and Taiyo feel or behave following the misunderstanding. That was your task as a student. Let us see how to now write the essay. Of course, it has 3 parts: the introduction, the body, where you give at least 4 paragraphs, and the conclusion. So let us begin with the introduction. So introduction is very simple. Introduction simply means give me your understanding of the question. What is your understanding of the question? So here we wanted to see how disagreements in families can cause wrangles. Those are just synonyms of misunderstanding causing conflicts. Paraphrase the question. That means use your own words to unveil your interpretation of the question. Avoid repeating the question word for word. Avoid that because that would simply mean you have not understood. So you just copy the question and pass it for an introduction. No way, no way. You cannot trick the examiner like that. You will not score anything. Then include the keywords in your introduction. Let us feel the misunderstanding in your introduction. Let us feel the conflict, even without saying the same words. Or even if you're going to use the word misunderstanding, for example, conflict, just twist a bit, play around with words so that it appears that you've understood the question. That is it. Your interpretation of the question is what matters most in introduction. And then, so link the misunderstanding to the conflict as you write your introduction or as you throw your keywords in there. Then contextualize, put it in context. Since we are answering in reference to Blossoms of the Savannah, let us feel, okay, that you've read and understood the book. So you may mention some of the issues that result in misunderstanding, e.g. FGM, early marriage, education, extravaganza, the father wanting a boy and getting a girl, such issues. So you can just, if you outline the points also, and it appears like this student has actually understood the question, then you score the mark. So it's not difficult to score the 2 marks. Just keep it brief. Don't write something too long. Then make sure the introduction is within 1 paragraph. Paragraph 1. Now let's go to developing the body. Here you're supposed to give at least 4 fully developed points. Don't worry about the length of the paragraph. Write as much as possible can, but just capturing all the events in the relevant episodes. Don't worry about the length of the paragraph too much. So you should actually worry about whether or not you're capturing enough details to support your argument. Okay? Because many of you ask, how long should the paragraphs be? Nobody really worries about that. We only want to see that you've interpreted the question correctly and you're giving us enough textual details. Each point occupies a separate paragraph. Do not split a point into more than 1 paragraph. No matter how long it appears, let it be within 1 paragraph. As long as it's just 1 point, 1 paragraph. Then give adequate textual illustrations on the misunderstanding between Olekaelo and the daughters. So in this case, points on Mama Milanoi are invalid because the question is clear. It limits us to Olekaelo. So cite enough details also on the evidence of the conflict, evidence of the misunderstanding, and the evidence of the conflict. Now, the paragraph you write must of course include this. Line 1, you see, as you're writing the paragraph, each paragraph, line 1 must answer the question. Here we mention the misunderstanding. For example, they differ over education or FGM or the extravaganza, the music extravaganza, or the early marriage. So at least let us see where the misunderstanding comes from. So line 1 must answer the question. For example, Olekaelo disagrees with Taiyo concerning the music extravaganza, leading to a bitter fallout between them. So that is a sample line 1. Most people call it a topic sentence. It doesn't matter what you want to call it, as long as the first line of each paragraph answers the question, so that the examiner sees the point before you try to illustrate. So when you look, let us break down that line 1. Olekaelo disagrees That is keyword number 1, misunderstanding. Ole Kaelo disagrees with Taiyo concerning the music extravaganza. That is the bone of contention, the music extravaganza. That is the issue that the two disagree on, leading to a bitter fallout. The fallout now is the argument of the conflict. You can see that we have actually answered the question on the first line before we try to give evidence. Now we are supposed to cite evidence. After that, we are supposed to cite evidence on the misunderstanding, then cite evidence on the conflict. So after that, of course, the line 1, then the next thing your paragraph should have is the illustration. That is details of what Taiyo wants. What does Taiyo want? Does she want the FGM? Okay, give us details from the book. Give us evidence from the book. If she doesn't, then details of her father's conflicting opinion. What does the father say about FGM? Give us the details from the book. Then, of course, details of the resultant conflict. So you'd have given the misunderstanding and the conflict. Then the last line, after you've, okay, line 1, then you've given a few other lines that support, or the supporting sentences, the evidence of the misunderstanding and the conflict. Then the last line of the paragraph, before you introduce another point, here you sum up the paragraph with a clincher statement. For example, you can just simply say, indeed, Ole Kaelo's disagreement with Taiyo leaves her embittered. So, of course, you must capture the intent of the question in that last line that sums up. So you can end there, then you begin another line. Secondly, Ole Kaelo also differs with Rezian over, then you give the point of contention. Now, these are the points of interpretation that we needed for that question. 1, music extravaganza. 2, university education. 3, baby boy, where this man wanted a boy but got a girl, so it brought some conflict and misunderstanding. Then 4, FGM, of course. And 5, the marriage to Oloisudori. He wants the daughter to be married. The daughter has other ideas. I want to go to university. I don't want to get married. Let us look at paragraph development. How do we develop the paragraph? I want us to learn how to identify relevant episodes that will help us to answer the question, and how to capture specific details that are required to score full mark in the paragraph. So we are going to use this example where Ole Kaelo disagrees with the daughter Taiyo over the music extravaganza, leading to a bitter fallout. Now, the illustrations are found between on page 1 to 2, page 5, page 44, and page 45. So I'm just going to read through some of the statements that capture the various episodes. And those statements include Taiyo had a battle with her father when he denied her permission to travel to Mombasa with other young men and women who had been selected by an FM radio station to attend an extravaganza. Then she had stubbornly put up a spirited fight but lost the battle. That left a wound in her heart that was still too raw to probe. Her rage was still seething in her. The simple faith and certainty of childhood had failed her. Her trust that her father would give her what she wanted, her trust that her father would give her whatever she requested had been badly shaken. When Rezian asked her to talk to their father about joining university, she recalled with bitterness how her father's refusal to allow her to go to Mombasa and participate in the music extravaganza nearly damaged the father-daughter relationship that had always been remarkably close. In her school days, on several occasions, she excelled in music festivals and she was awarded and garlanded. Broadcasting stations recognized her talent and encouraged her to take music as a career. On several occasions, her parents applauded her when she won trophies on account of her performance. So she felt they would not have any objective if she pursued the desire of her heart as a future career. An FM radio station offered to sponsor her to attend a music extravaganza in Mombasa and thereafter attend a short course to gauge her abilities. She thought the news would delight her parents, but her father was furious. He curtly refused to grant her permission and angrily disallowed any further discussion on the matter, effectively crushing Taiyo's hope. No daughter of Ole Kaelo would demean herself, and her family asked to perform in public in exchange for monetary gain. It was okay to perform in school festivals, but to perform to a public gallery was one short step to harlotry. No amount of persuasion would change her father's mind. Okay, so those are actually actual specific details from the text that would help you answer that question or develop that paragraph. And that, of course, we've said that they come from certain episodes. That episode, of course, you must master and internalize that episode before you can answer such questions. So let me just read you a sample of such a paragraph, now condensed into a paragraph that would actually score all the marks, capturing all those details that I've been reading. Line 1. First, Ole Kaelo fails to understand Taiyo's deep passion for music, denying her an opportunity to attend an extravaganza, resulting in a bitter fallout between them. The question is answered. Let us now give the illustrations. The battle between them ensues when he denies her permission to go to Mombasa with other young men and women to attend an extravaganza. Since she is passionate about music, she puts up a spirited fight but loses the battle. Taiyo has always excelled in music festivals and been awarded. Owing to her talent, broadcasting stations encouraged her to pursue music, the desire of her heart, as a career. She did not imagine that her parents could object this, since they have always applauded her whenever she wins trophies. An FM radio station offers to sponsor her to attend the music extravaganza. She thinks her parents would be delighted, but there is a misunderstanding since her father is furious instead. He curtly denies her permission and disallows further discussion. Taiyo's fervid persuasions fall on deaf ears. Ole Kaelo opines that performing in public is demeaning oneself and her family. He has no qualms about performing in music festivals, but feels that performing to a public gala for monetary gain is one short step to harlotry. This results in a serious conflict since it leaves a raw wound in Taiyo's heart. She sits with rage. She loses the simple faith and certainty she had in her father. Her trust in her father is badly shaken. The father-daughter relationship that was remarkably close is nearly damaged by the misunderstanding. This is sufficient proof that misunderstanding in families can cause conflict in relationships. Thank you so much. So I want to stop there. I will give you the full essay in a different video, and I'm also going to leave the whole document, a link to my blog where I've written about whatever we've been discussing in this video, in the description of the video, so that you can now follow slowly on your own. You can print it out, read on your own. So I hope the video was helpful. If it was, please comment and tell me something about it. If you have any questions, also just ask in the comment section. If you want me to make, okay, you can also give me some suggestions of more videos to make. And please subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media as well, because I post some links and some tips, Wafula Wekati, on all platforms. Thank you.